cook it, like let's say you steam it, your orange, your bright orange here won't stay as pretty if you have the green involved because of the carryover, the pigments, but you'll still have flavor. It just will have a little bit of that green pigment coming over. We're just going to cut off that last bit. And again, I'm not going to keep my skins, but you can do that. So slice, you should have it sliced up. Get off that green. There's a couple ways of starting. I mean, again, this is a firm squash. So we're going to try and do like, it talks about chopped. And remember, here's what we're looking for to make it a little easier to know how big to cut it is you think of your crostini as about that big. So whatever's going to fit on top of that, whether it's 1 or 2 pieces, and then make it so that you can layer those on there with the cheese below it and the pecans on top. So that can give you an idea of how to cut it. The other thing too, when you're roasting vegetables is if you can have the same consistency size of cuts, they'll tend to cook evenly. If you have a bunch of thin, smaller cuts, those might cook faster. Just keep that in mind. So if you can do slices that are pretty consistent, that will help. Oops. I think I'll line this up and chop it. And then also make sure, keep your hands, because this is one of those firm type of a vegetable, you know, keep your fingers clear and out of the area. Okay. All right. Now we're going to let that sit because we actually need to get our bread out before we're going to toast that, because the bread will come out and then we'll put this in with a little bit more oil and then be able to toss it with the garlic. So we're going to mince the garlic up. You can cut your ends off of your garlic. And if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. If you have been with us a while, you've seen our style and our techniques. But if you have a way of cutting garlic, you're welcome to do that. So we're going to mince. We actually need to mince 1 garlic because I should have. We're going to rub. I smashed one. We'll use that smashed one on our crostini because we're going to kind of brush that across. Then we'll mince the 1. All right. So that minced will go with your pumpkin. And the other one, we're going to basically just rub it across the top of our cooked crostinis. Okay. Lemon zest. We'll also get that ready because that will go in with your pumpkin as well. If you don't have a zester, so a couple of different versions of zesters. Here's what we call a microplaner, really nice tool. Again, make sure your lemons are washed. Can't get that. And you can zest, because really what you want is that nice fine lemon color. You don't want to get the white pith part, so that's where it gets bitter. If you don't have a zester, there's another version of like a zester. So this one you can pull across and it also does that zesting. So that's another option. Final option is just a grater. If you have a 4-sided grater, best to use your smallest edge, and then you can run it along. Just watch out for your knuckles because they do well on grating as well. Okay, so just grate the edges. And again, you're just trying to get that first layer of the skin. Okay. And if you have cuts on your hands or your hands are dry, you're going to feel your lemon juice climbing into those little areas. And we're going to scrape out the zest. So this one gets a little bit, probably a little finer, but you can definitely still use that option. Okay. The other thing too is, how do I get garlic smell off my hands? If anybody's been with us, you might have remembered, how do we get that garlic smell? Well, I now have lemon smell on my hands, but how do I get the garlic smell off my hands? If I don't have to have fancy soaps, I don't have to have anything like that. What can I use that's at home that can take that garlic smell out? Does anybody know? So that'll be a question for you. Okay, so we're waiting on our crostinis. So we're going to get our pecans going. And we're going to lay these out on parchment. Okay, so we're going to lay our pecans. There we go. And then you can put together in a pan, we're going to add brown sugar. So we have a brown sugar mixture that it says BS for brown sugar. So that one's for your pecans.
Yes, because we're all adults, right?
That's right. BS for brown sugar. So we're going to put that in a skillet. We're going to add the brown sugar, cinnamon. So there's brown sugar, there's cinnamon, there's salt, cayenne pepper, and we're going to add to that the vanilla and the orange zest.
I didn't put any cayenne pepper.
Oh, no cayenne pepper. Okay, so you're lucky we don't have this. We don't have that kick spice. So we're going to put that into our skillet. And my crostinis are done, so we're going to check those. And they look great. So I will pull. I'm going to pull those out a second. We're going to grab a hot pad. So your ovens are roughly about 400. There we go. So they got a little bit brown. They're ready to go. We're going to take the crostinis off because we're going to use this same parchment for our pumpkin. So we'll put your crostinis along on side in another container. That works. So I'll use my spoon, get these off. Okay, there's our crostinis. They'll wait for us until we can get everything finished. So we're going to add the pumpkin. Just remember your pan is hot. So we're going to add the pumpkin and the garlic and the lemon zest. And if you can keep them in a single surface, that's even better. So we're going to get our lemon zest off our cutting board. And I might have used all of my oil for all of the bread. So we're going to have to borrow some oil. So if you did that, you might be borrowing some oil out of your pantry. Sorry for that. We got a little extra there. So we're going to add about a tablespoon of oil onto our kabocha. And then we can toss it together. You just want to mix it up. That's what you're trying to get that. You're trying to get those, coated. You got that lemon zest in there, the garlic's in there. Creates a really nice seasoning. You can salt and pepper it too. And we're going to lay that flat. And then we'll put this in the oven. This will take you about, I'm gonna try and spread those out a little bit more. It'll take about 20 minutes. And again, my small pieces might get a little bit darker than the others for roasting. So roasted vegetables, why is roasted vegetables such a really yummy product? What makes them so good? I don't know if anybody understands what makes these so good when we roast vegetables. Any idea? What is it that's going on with your veggies that is turning them into something phenomenal besides the seasoning and the cooking? But why we roast them? 20, oh yeah, we got about a 20-minute time on that. So we're going to go back to our, we're jumping back into the pecans. So if we do the pecans now, you've got your, we've got all the cinnamon, salt, as I was mentioning earlier. So now we have to zest. We want to zest 2 teaspoons of zest. So I'll wash it real quick. And then we want about 2 teaspoons. So what does roasting do to veggies?
It brings out the natural sugar.
Yeah, you got that caramelization of your veggies and the sugars there. So your oven, here's the trick to roasting vegetables, is 400 to 400, even 425 degrees. Hot oven, it seals in that moisture, but then it also creates the caramelization of the sugars from the vegetables. So that's what you're striving for. If you cook them at a lower temperature, let's say you start them out at 300, or you put them in the oven and you're bringing your oven temperature up, you're kind of steaming them. So you don't quite get that same caramelization happening compared to if you put them in at a hot oven. So you really need that high temperature to start with. And again, the orange zest was totally optional, but it really makes a nice flavor option for your pecans. All right, so we're gonna add the orange zest and then a little bit of water. So we're gonna do about 1.5 teaspoons. Let's see, how many teaspoons in a tablespoon, everybody? How many teaspoons? I just zested the whole orange. So roughly it's about 2 teaspoons or a teaspoon. So how many teaspoons in 1 tablespoon? Yay! How many?
4. Is it 4?
No.
No, not 4.
Not 4. I do have a little more than a teaspoon, but you know what? This flavor is really nice. We tried it earlier. Really good flavor. So if you want to use the whole zest, feel free, because it does talk about 2 teaspoons. So I probably went a little more than 1.5 teaspoons. So how many teaspoons in a tablespoon,
3.
class? Yes, 3. So if I need a tablespoon and a half, how many teaspoons of water should I put in there? So half of a half is a quarter, right? A tablespoon is 3. So 1.5 plus a quarter. So 1 3/4 of a teaspoon of water.
So much math.
So much math and cooking. My students think it's crazy. So I just got to figure out if I've got the right, I think this is a 1/2 teaspoon. Yeah. So we were going for 3/4 of a teaspoon of water. Not the easiest to get out of a faucet that's running fast. All right. So you have your mixture here, and we are going to get that cooking. So I probably will have some kind of a spatula to stir it up, but that's going to start off our process. Make sure I turn on the right burner this round. All right. We have that will get going. What we're trying to do is melt that sugar. So we're going to get it to the point where it's melted down. The heat will start to break that down and create more of a liquid consistency so that we can coat the pecans with that. Okay, so we're going to get that heated up. And then we're going to add the pecans. So we're going to get this brown sugar to melt, and then it's going to bubble about a minute before we add our pecans. Okay, in the meantime, you can peek in on your squash, although it still has about 16 minutes to go. Is anybody cooking with us tonight? And anybody have any questions or need me to back up a step at all? Yay. All right. So we're getting that started. So that's for your pecans.
And Esther and Krista.
Fantastic. Okay. So while that's going, while we've started all that kind of process, we've got a bunch of things to think about. But I do have a fun question because we're going to talk about pears, right? We're going to be doing our pears. And so what Christmas carol has pears as a reference? So think about what Christmas song has pears as a reference. Let you think about that for a second. In the meantime, I'm letting that heat up, and I'm going to
12 Days of Christmas.
yes, the original one with a partridge in a pear tree. So pears have been around for a really long time. Back to 5000 BC, they have record of pears. And of course, if you think of all the Greek mythology and all of that, pears are very evident in their art. So pears have been around a long time. That's starting. I'm going to drive us back to the Kabocha section, and we're going to mix up our cheese. So we have Boursin cheese as well as ricotta, and it should be all together. So we've got a tub of that for you, and we're going to mix this in a bowl. So it looks like the ricotta cheese is on the bottom. You can actually make your own homemade ricotta cheese. If you've never tried, it's just whole milk that is boiled with a little bit of an acid. So we use vinegar usually, and turn in, and then we can strain it through cheesecloth and make our own ricotta cheese. Then you can have the leftover whey, which is the separation of the protein, the liquid, and you can turn that in and use it in your smoothies. So power-packed protein drink. All right, so you've got your cheese mixtures together, and then we are going to combine our seasoning or our fresh herbs, and I'm watching my sauce over here. And Kelly, we're getting close, so we can show that one. So it's starting to bubble. I can definitely smell the orange in it, which smells fantastic. So we're going to let that get to a real good bubble, and we're going to let that bubble for about a minute. So we'll keep an eye on that. You can get your sage and thyme out. I always laugh if we only had enough time. Well, now we have time, right? Plenty of time tonight. So we have our fresh thyme, and if you haven't ever smelled fresh thyme, just kind of squeeze it, smell it. Wow, that's like one of those amazing herbs. And then you have sage. So sage is actually used a lot of times with pumpkins and not pumpkins, turkeys, cooking turkey. So Thanksgiving is definitely a combination of sage and thyme and all kinds of other good things. So we're going to wash these. That's bubbling. So we're going to wash this real quick and come back to it. I have my sugar mixture going, and then I'm going to add my pecans, or I'm going to add it to, no, I got to put my pecans on in my pan. We're going to toast them up a little bit. So we want to get these coated. Of course, there's definitely options where you bake them. This was just a real quick way of doing a candied pecan. So we're going to get it back on the stovetop, and we're going to get those nicely coated. And we're gonna cook those for about, gotta go back to my, should have like 5 recipes sitting open, right? We're gonna cook those for about 2 to 3 minutes. You'll smell the nuts start to get, as the recipe says, it will start to smell nutty. So you'll smell come up. Plus you'll smell like the contents of the seasonings. Okay, so about 2 to 3 minutes. We just want to watch those so they don't burn. So if you smell burned, you'll know that you've gone a little too far, but you're trying to still caramelize those sugars as well as coat those pecans. Okay. So we've got those stirring, and then we are going to let those cook a few minutes. And then we're going to pour them onto our parchment paper to cool. We have about 10 minutes roughly on our kabocha. So we're doing good on time. I'll let those sit a second. So going back to our pears, I'm going to wash those off real quick. And we're going to peel our pears. So Basque pears, anybody have an idea of how many varieties of pears we actually grow in the US? They're grown a lot in the Pacific Northwest. And we do have a number that we actually grow. We actually can get pears, all year round. But any idea how many varieties we can grow? We actually can grow 10 in the US. I don't know if I went too quick and didn't let anybody answer that one, but there are actually 3,000 varieties in the world. So 10 is the main, the key number that we can get in the US. Now, Basque pears, if you're familiar with pears, they are a little bit firmer and they will hold up better when you boil them. If you get Bartlett pears, the ones that are smaller green, they will not hold up in the water. So those are more for juicing pears and, purees and things. Pears are added. If you look at a lot of recipes, pears is part of that. And fruit juices, pear juice is added, as well as like apple juice. But you can peel your pears. I'm trying to make it so get nice strips off. Just be careful. If you do it over a trash can, be sure not to drop it in the trash can because they do get a little slippery as you go. So maybe over your sink is a good option so that you can reduce the risk of dropping it on the ground like I almost did. Good catch, right? One more cutting board will help. And then we'll peel this other one. This other one, look for bruises. If you have a few bruises, you can cut it out. Or if it's really soft. Here's the trick to poaching pears. They can actually be done fast or they can take a while. And that's all due to the relative ripeness that they are. So one was super soft. The one I'm working with is pretty soft and one is pretty firm. So it might just take a little bit longer for the firmer one. But again, that's an option. Just, you're going to watch them. All right. I think I need to rinse that one a bit. Okay. Rinse those off. And my nuts are toasted very nicely over here. Pecans. I'll just set those aside for a second. Okay. So we have our toasted pecans. Trying to smell them. Oh, I smell the cinnamon and I can definitely smell them. So they look good. They've been on there for a little bit. So we'll pull them off and we're going to let those dry. Oops. We're going to turn off the heat. And this is when you're going to transfer them on your parchment paper and try and spread them out so they can dry. And cool off. Okay. There you go. They're just going to sit and dry for a little bit, and then we will chop them up for our crostinis to top them with. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside, and we're good to go. These can actually, you can hang on to them for a little while because they are toasted, so they're safe in the freezer or in a baggie in the fridge if you need to. Okay, let's go back to our kabocha. So we've got that thyme ready. And we are going to chop that up. So we're going to take the stems off. Some of the easiest ways, like similar with rosemary, is go against, so that you don't want the sticks. So take it against the grain and you can peel it right off. And we needed roughly 2 of the sprigs. These are considered a sprig of thyme. So you have 2, and you'll just pull those. Oops, the tops come off. Pull it down and try and get rid of the chunks, because remember, these aren't going to be actually cut or diced because they're already very small. So we're going to put those on into the cheese mixture, and it goes in there well. But your sage, again, smell these before you chop them all up, because it makes such a nice flavor. Another herb, easy to grow, both thyme and sage. You can grow them in the garden here pretty well. Okay. There's your mixture that you're going to put in with your cheese. So we're going to grab our ricotta and Boursin cheese. Okay, and we're going to add that to the mix. There we go. And we have lemon juice that we need to add. So we're going to take that half a lemon and we're going to say roughly like a quarter of it. If you're worried about seeds, you could go into your container that had your ricotta and squeeze. You probably don't need, because remember it was a quarter. So you could squeeze not quite the whole thing. If you like a lot of lemon, you can add the whole thing and check for seeds. We're good. We're going to mix that in with our cheese mixture. Okay. And mix until it's incorporated. So it comes out a nice texture. It's like a smooth consistency. And then that will set aside until we're ready for our topping with our pumpkin and put it on the crostinis. Okay. So that is set aside. We're going to hang on to that. And now let's go into our pears, and then we'll do our cranberry sauce last. So we're going to do 4 cups. No, 2 cups. Did we cut this? We cut this one in half. So we're going to do 2 cups of water. And I've got a cup over here. Okay. So 2 cups of water. And you should have a parchment. You should have gotten a half sheet of parchment. So we're going to cut a half a sheet of parchment to make that cover. But in the meantime, we can cut our pears. So I will move a few things here. Just going to push that back a little bit. So it looks like I have a giant green cutting board. All right, so we're going to cut our pears, and I want to make sure that's clean. I don't want to have garlic flavored pears. Okay, so you can cut the ends off, like the tip. Cut the back. Again, you want to try and keep it as much as you can. You can set it upright and cut through. Just grab on both sides. It is a little slippery because it's peeled. So then you have your core. So this is what we call a palm type of classification of fruit because it has the core in it. And I'm going to try and go as close to the natural shape. So I cut them in quarters, and then we'll take the paring knife would be a little better. We're going to cut the little bit of that core out. You don't have to worry about too much of that, but we'll cut that seed area out. Okay. Then I'll cut through this one again. So remember, Bosc pears, really good because they're firm, at least for this. Get the seeds out. And again, if you have bruising, you can cut that out at the same time you're getting them ready. Okay. Top. Right. Cut the cores. If you have a melon baller, if you kept it whole, like a whole half, sounds kind of like an oxymoron, right? A whole half. If you cut it in half and you left the pear this, and you have a melon baller, or you could actually even try it with like a tablespoon or a teaspoon and try and dig it out, then you can keep your pear halves rather than quarters. All right, so we're going to check our pumpkin. We're looking for it to be tender, so we want to check it with I can check it with a knife and see it smells good, because I can smell the garlic. It's getting tender. You really want it to be a nice bite rather than having to crunch on it. So we've definitely got, and the garlic is roasting up in there nicely with it too. Stir it up, and I think I'll go like 1 more minute. So just decide on your own if you want your pumpkin cooked just a little bit longer. So, whoo. Smell the garlic and get the heat. So yum. All right. So those will be ready in a minute. Let me finish off. I need to probably rinse my knife from the pumpkin. And we're going to cut this. How's everybody doing that's cooking with us? I know we're jumping all over we've got a bunch of different recipes, kind of multitasking at once. But now we're ready to put our pears in. Is everybody doing okay? Okay, good, good. All right, so we're gonna kind of arrange our pears so that they sit in the water. And the trick is that we really want to keep them covered. Because if they're not covered, then they'll get, they turn brown and they're not as nice. And so the texture also. So if they don't sit below the water, you can add a little bit of water to it, which I'm gonna, and I'll parchment paper on top, but there's a couple of areas that are sitting really high. So I'll put a little bit more water in. Here's the nice thing about this recipe is that we can do a reduction, which means that we are going to reduce that liquid to a lot less, and then it'll create that syrupy consistency for the poached pears. So it will actually turn out really nice. But in the meantime, let's pull out our pumpkin. That is definitely done. So you've got a little bit of browning, so toasted, caramelized, and your garlic is caramelized. So it should be ready to go, and that can sit and wait for us to be put together with our crostinis. I'll put that over here. All right. So back to our pears. So here's the fun task of your, and I did not practice this before right now. So we're going to see if we can do this. So you're going to take a parchment paper, square, and we're going to make it into a circle that'll fit your pan. So you kind of want to, it's all based on what pan you're poaching in. If you're poaching in a really big pan, you may not have to cut much, but give yourself, right at that area of, what's the word I want to say? Like thank you. So here goes math again, right? So find the radius that's going to be about middle, put your parchment paper across your pan and kind of get an idea. Yeah, so the folded corner is here. So it's kind of like making snowflakes when we were young, right? So get that corner needs to be in the pot. If you cut this one, then it's not gonna make what we want. So you're gonna have the folded corner, and then we're gonna lay that in there roughly, and then try and get a cut. And if you have to trim it, you'll be fine. So you should have kind of like, it looks like, you could turn this into a funnel, right? So it should be, that's giant. So I need to trim it down. trim it down a bit. So let's go a little ways in. Let's try that. Really want it to sit on top. We can have it on top. If you need to trim a little further, feel free to trim down a little bit more. You just kind of want it resting on your pears. Okay, and then cut a little bit out of the center because we really want to, the whole purpose is to create that small hole to allow for steam to come out. So then you can put it on lay it on top of your pears. I think I'm gonna have to fold it a little bit. It's gonna get wet and it'll soften a bit. So then we've covered our pears pretty well. Okay, so you can see, or I can pick it up and show you because it's not hot yet. So we've covered them up nicely, tucked them in. They're ready to poach. Okay, so we're gonna poach them. We're gonna, okay. We have some extra fun things to add in your water. It's totally up to you what you would like to add. But we have, looks like we have craisins for you. We have P for pear, but it's actually sugar. So we're going to add this amount of sugar into it's a half a cup. So I'll pull off my demoed sliced. And we're going to add that sugar. And we'll add our cinnamon stick. Oh yeah, we're gonna rehydrate our craisins at the end. So we'll let that sit. We have vanilla. PPV. So poached pear vanilla. And honey. All right, I'm going to pull the honey out. All right, so you have all those wonderful flavors going into your pears. You can mix them up in the water. All right. We're going to put our blanket back across the top of them. And we're going to cook those at it just depends on your stovetop. I'm going to start with medium and see where I can get to. We want to keep them at a simmer. We don't want to boil them because here's the thing. If you boil them, we want to do that to a certain degree after the pears are done, but we want them to cook a little bit slow. We don't want to cook them too quick. So that simmering will allow it to cook without evaporating too much. And the protection of your parchment paper will help that too. So those are kind of sitting and cooking for about 10 to 20 minutes. Again, every pear is different depending on the ripeness of your pear. If it was really soft, check them sooner than that. Check them around 10 minutes because it might be done beforehand. So let's get back to, that's the pears and those are going, and we're going to use the craisins afterwards so that we can plump those up. And we're going to do the cranberry. Okay, so we will do the cranberry sauce now. Oops, and that I have to do here. There we go. Get this on medium. Okay, cranberries. All right. So wash your cranberries. Do cranberries grow in water? Do they really grow in water? That's the question for you. Do they grow in water? I have a couple fun facts. Do we grow cranberries? Do they grow in water? We hear about cranberry bogs, but do they actually grow in water their whole lifetime? Anybody have an idea? Do they grow in water? I'm going to put them in here to rinse them. Anybody guess? It's either a yes or a no, right? So did anybody guess? Did nobody wants to guess? Do they grow in water all their life?
Rissa says, I don't think they grow.
Okay. Michelle is correct. So they grow on a bush, and then they flood the bog about a night before they harvest them. So they flood about 18 inches of water into the bog, and then these, as you can see, they float. So they have a lot of air in them, and it allows for them to float to the top, and then they shake the bushes as they go through their bogs, and that makes them come to the surface. So that's how they grow and release the cranberries when they're ready. Fun fact, they bounce. So if you bounce your cranberries, they do bounce. They're one of the fruits that have air pockets in them. So we're going to learn about our air pockets when we cook them. So I'll drain those off. Oh, okay. Yeah, but could you think about how many cranberries you have to pull off of a bush, and they actually just come off much easier. So they do bounce. So they have a decent amount of air in them. So what we're going to do is add your cranberries, and here's the interesting fact, only 5% of cranberries are actually eaten fresh. Or sold as fresh. So most people go to the grocery store and they buy the canned cranberry sauce. So tonight you're in for a treat. This is my personal opinion, far and above canned cranberry sauce. So, because as a kid, I just did not do the cranberry thing, but as I made this homemade, wow, very different. So add your cranberries, and they are so pretty. What's that? And we're going to save a 1/4 cup before you add your water. We're going to save a 1/4 cup. So we are going to measure out, I can measure out 4 tablespoons. 4 tablespoons makes a 1/4 cup. And the reason that we're adding them is kind of, they're definitely hard to tell when you hit a 1/4 cup, but we just want to have a few on the side. And the reason we're doing that is just to get that texture, because as cranberries cook, they actually release pectin. So the pectin is what makes your cranberry sauce thicken. So people that say, my cranberry sauce isn't thick, you just might need to cook them a little bit longer. So that is why they are cooked in water, is so that you can actually break them down, and then you get that pectin. All right, so 1 tablespoons or 1 tablespoon of water. And my sugar. Oh, we have sugar. It looks like it was going to be a C. So that is what you're looking for on your sugar. So we're going to put in the 1 tablespoon of water. Okay, along with a 1/2 cup of sugar. And if you have any available zesting left from your, so we should have saved a little bit off of our orange, but we can zest off a little bit. Oh, we have another one that we can use. So we'll scrape off a little bit of that. Oops. So we want the zest. You don't have to do too much, but it gives it that nice flavor. If you zested the whole thing like I did earlier and you ran out of zest, then you could squeeze a little bit of the orange juice in there, and that will help also. It's just kind of that essence of orange that we're looking for. Okay. So we have that zested, and we're going to turn that on, and you can add salt and pepper to taste once it's done, but I always suggest that you start out with just the first ingredients and then go on. So you want to heat up your saucepan about medium and let it heat up. So right now it looks just like that, and we're going to, that sugar and water and cranberries will start to soften. I've got my pears. They are not quite boiling, so I'm going to time that up a little bit. I don't have anything in the oven, so I'm going to turn that off. So we have cranberry sauce going. So remember I talked about the air in cranberries, so they actually will pop once they hit temperature. So we'll have that pop, and you'll know. So we're cooking them about 12 minutes. So it takes anywhere from 10 to 12 minutes for them to start breaking. But you'll hear them pop, they'll burst, and then you can get ready to let them cook a little bit. And again, think about your, you want that pectin to release so that you get that thickening of your cranberries. So let that sit. While that's cooking, we're going to take you back to crostinis and run you, and we'll put these together. So we have our sauce and we have our garlic that we are going to rub on the crostinis, so you can rub it. Each side, it won't matter what side. So if you mashed it, you're going to get your flavor of your garlic coming out versus if you left it whole without smashing it. So I'm going to try and move it around. Okay. And I'll do just a plateful. We're trying to smash that. There. Okay. Find my side that had the olive oil. All right. So once you get your crostinis covered in a little bit of garlic, I don't think anybody answered my, how do we get rid of the garlic smell? I don't think so. I'll tell you in a second. So you're going to take your cheese mixture, and we can spoon it on top of your, remember, you've got all that cheese mixture. So however many crostini pieces you've got, you can determine your, how much you put on each one. But I definitely, if you rubbed your garlic like I did, I'm going to have garlic fingers. So how do I get that smell out of off my fingers? Especially if I'm eating something sweet, I don't want to have garlic essence. How do I get that off?
Cheryl says the stainless steel spoon.
Absolutely right. So if you have a stainless steel spoon, or most of you have stainless steel faucets, rub your faucet. Massage your faucet. This is a chance that you get to thank your faucet for being there, and it will take away all the garlic smell. It's magic. Okay. So there's your crostini. You can spread your cheese a little bit, and then we're going to grab our pumpkin. And we will add a piece or two of pumpkin. Again, you can do however much you'd like. Okay. And it's okay to get some of that garlic that roasted in there with it, because roasted garlic is just wonderful. All right. And then what we'll do is chop up some of those nuts real quick. I'm going to chop those. I'm going to set that cheese mixture aside. My pears are going. I think you might end up finishing some of your pears after we finish tonight, but feel free to just keep them going. And my cranberries are starting to pop. A few of them have popped. You can kind of see that they've broken open the skins. So those are good. 10 minutes on the pears. All right, let's check them. Oh, they look pretty. And I probably would do good if I poke them with a fork, or actually it talks about a paring knife. A pear and a paring knife, right? So here is my paring knife. And if they look a little translucent, or they give to that paring knife, then you're at about that right texture. So my small ones, definitely. My larger ones, not. But we have those. So what I would suggest, if you don't want to have your small ones turn to mush, is to pull those out so that you don't have a they don't get too soft and disintegrate in your water while your larger ones are still poaching. And then what we can do with the juice is we're going to try and reduce that. So if you, like I talked about earlier, if you put that and make that a reduction, you can actually reduce the water by about, if you can drop it down to, you know, drop it in half after your pears come out. I'm going to put those, cover those back up. But if you reduce it to about half, you'll get a nice syrup solution. And that will be what you'll keep your pears in when they go into the fridge. So my cranberries are looking good. They still have some time to pop. I've got my crostinis without the pecans. So we're going to chop up some pecans. And these do get pretty sticky, but that will help to drop them onto our crostini. So you can chop them up and then add them onto your chop them as fine as you'd like. Oh, now my pears are roaring. My cranberries are looking good, and I'm just going to add a little bit. Try and do it this way. Add a little bit on top. And if you have leftover thyme, that's a great garnish that you can use, because that will make it really pretty. So that was only a portion of the pecans, so you have that as an option. And there's your crostinis. And a final with a sage leaf and thyme on top. There you go. And the cranberry sauce. Back to that real quick. So we're looking good. We can turn the heat down a little bit, let them simmer. So again, it's totally up to you how much you want to see popped. The more that pop, the more that you're going to get the pectin out to help thicken it. It will thicken as it cools. So don't worry, it's not going to be a problem if it's not quite thick yet. So it will thicken as it cools. My pears are definitely boiling, so we'll check those. Still not quite. I would say those will take another couple of minutes. So I don't think I have a timer going, but we'll start a timer for like 3 minutes and I'll let those go. So if we pull those off later, you'll know why, but I'll show you the final pears. Some serving suggestions. You could cook up some extra cranberries if you have a couple, or if you don't have any of those around, then you could definitely use your cinnamon stick. You can use some of the liquid. If you put your, because we're not able to put our cranberries or the craisins, sorry, the craisins that you have, you're going to put those into the liquid, the poaching liquid, let them plump up about 10 minutes, and then they get nice and plumped again. And then you have your liquid as well. And then we created a chocolate sauce, a dark chocolate sauce. So a simple dark chocolate sauce is yummy over that, as well as your pears. And for the cranberry sauce, what you're going for after it sits for a bit, there is your homemade cranberry sauce. So it's got a really nice, yeah. And you'll add your, after these cook for about that 10-minute time frame, you'll add your the ones that you set aside, and that's the ones that will sit in there, and they'll pop a little bit, but they'll have a little bit more texture than what your others did. So there you go. That's cranberry sauce. And here's the nice thing. If you buy cranberries now and you have a giant bag like you can get at Costco, you can actually freeze your cranberries and use them next year. You don't have to use them all this year. They do perfectly well freezing. So, wow, we did a bunch in an hour. So hopefully, I know you guys are all, you might still be cooking, which is completely fine. Enjoy the rest of your cooking process, and you should be good to go. Join us next month in December. We'll be doing some holiday festive cooking. So hopefully you can make it back for that. We appreciate having you here. We're thankful. This is Thanksgiving time frame, so we're thankful of that. And we look forward to seeing you in December. Have a safe weekend. And if we don't see you until December, have a safe Thanksgiving. Thanks, everybody.